Okay, so here we are with the Pulsar Modular P11 Abyss compressor. Now this is a very comprehensive compressor. It's got some unique controls to it, and it's quite a undertaking to learn it, because it's got the basic controls, but it's got some, what makes it special is the parts that you need to kind of spend a bit of time learning. So, but it's got some unique characteristics to the sound. I can't say I've completely learned how to work with this compressor yet, because it's very new, but it's certainly powerful and it's certainly very flexible, so I can't imagine that I'm not going to end up using this. So I'm not going to go through everything in it comprehensively, but I wanted to start with listening to one of its unique characteristics, one of its number of unique characteristics in terms of sonic characteristics. So what I'm doing here is I'm absolutely smashing the drum bus with a fast release and a fast attack. And what's interesting here is the smoothness of the cymbals. Normally when you slam something like that, the cymbals just turn into a horrendous distorted wash, and even if it's not heavily distorted, it's like a really kind of dense, kind of not pleasant sounding wash. But here it just sounds really silky smooth. So let's have a listen to what this is like. I'll take it out and then I'm going to bring it in, just have a listen to that top end of the cymbals and how absolutely crushed it is, and yet still silky smooth sounding. So even when I bring this round, which basically moves it from more of an opto to more of a FET or a VCA style, to me it sounds a bit more FET-y than VCA sounding, over here where it really starts to break up and distort more, it's still smooth. Even though it's distorting, the distortion itself is quite smooth sounding compared to most compressors, which if you break them up like that, you know, it's one hell of a mess. This doesn't sound like that. And over here in the more kind of opto style, it's super smooth. So that's pretty unique. If you can imagine mixing some of that in to your cymbals, you could create a really nice smooth. So I'm going to just do that. I'm going to bring in some of this dry signal. So really adds a lot of that crushed sound without it sounding crushed in the same sort of way that we're used to. So that's interesting. That's really different sounding, and I think that's potentially useful, especially if you just wanted a really silky, smooth top end on your cymbals. You could just bring in, say, maybe you could high pass that, or not high pass it necessarily because you get a phase thing going on there, but you could use a low shelf to just take away everything but the top end and bring that in behind your cymbals. Lots of possibilities there. So I just wanted to start with that because I thought that was an interesting demonstration of a unique sound that this has. It's got, I'm not going to go through every feature, but I'm just going to mention a few of the key features. It's got the usual compressor things here, as you have on every compressor. I'm not going to go through those because you know what these are. It's got an expander here, which is slightly less common, but this, as I mentioned, is a kind of a, you know, there are other compressors that have things like this, but this is uniquely a unique algorithm to this compressor and how it moves from a kind of more opto style to a more kind of FET or VCA style on the right there. And that I find one of its most powerful controls. Got a gain limit, which I think is so welcome in any compressor and so much missed in so many compressors that's nice to have. I'm not actually using that in this case, but it's also got some EQs, which I'm guessing are taken from their EQ, and that's kind of an unusual thing to have on a compressor. You can put them into the side chain, and in combination with this high pass filter on the side chain, you can do quite a bit in terms of tailoring how it reacts to the incoming signal by EQing that side chain. So there's quite a lot of power in that, and these have shelf and peak shapes to them, so you could actually do a lot with that. I'm not going to look at that in this video. It's got this O2 control, and it's really not, I'm not sure what this does, and the manual doesn't really explain exactly what it does. It says it opens the sound out and makes it more dense, and I find more of the more density thing is what I hear from it. It is worth having. I'm not sure exactly what it does. I haven't tried it on enough different sources to really know what it does. But I do find myself turning it up and thinking, okay, yeah, I like that. It gives it, it fills in the density in a certain kind of way. Looking at Plugin Doctor kind of changes the harmonic content a bit, but it's not like it adds loads of harmonics. I'm not sure exactly what that is doing, but it's an interesting one. It changes the tone. And then we've got this up here, which is basically changing the harmonic content. And it describes it as moving through various different hardware units as you go through. And if you watch it in Plugin Doctor, you can see it pretty dramatically changes the patterns of harmonics as you move this around. So that gives you quite a different bunch of different flavors. This changes the whole compressor characteristic, really quite a powerful feature. You can have all your settings here, and it's almost like you've changed to another kind of compressor when you click this. It's a lot more dense, but equally good. And then it's got these preamps, and these are pretty powerful. You got two, well, they're not preamps, they're transformers rather, emulated transformers, which this company specializes in from their previous plugins. EQ plugins was really a modeling of a transformer, and they've taken, I'm guessing, that expertise into here, and there's two different transformer models here that you can before the compressor saturated or after the compressor saturated with two sets of transformers on each. Now, the one thing I wish they had on here was some gain compensation, but they don't, and I can see some justification for why they don't have it on the input, because you can drive the input, I guess, with this. I'm not sure if it actually does drive it. It certainly turns the level up as you move up the amount of saturation. I'd really like to see it compensated. There's quite a number of plugins coming out, more recent plugins, where they are fully compensated when you turn up the saturation, and it's every engineer wants that. So I would really ask them maybe in the next revision to put saturation, so compensation, gain compensation into these. This even more brings the volume up like massively. It's like a volume control, literally, plus saturation. So it means you're just constantly doing this every time you move these, and it's, yeah, it's quite a palaver or rigmarole to try and work with these. So if they were gain compensated, that would be fantastic. But nonetheless, they do give you some nice saturation, and quite complex saturation coming out of these. So that's an added textural thing, that this unique thing that this compressor has. So I think that's it for what I'm going to go over, apart from the fact that it's got MS. It's got a bunch of other things too, but I'm not going to go over every detail of it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this one and have a look at looking at on individual instruments. So I'm going to start with the snare. And what I've got is a quite extreme setting, just so you can hear what it can do, with a pretty extreme compression, so it's like a really smacky snare sound. So it's more than I probably do in most situations, and of course you could bring some bit of wet dry in there to pull it back a bit, but I wanted to make it a little extreme just so you could hear what the compressor can do. So I'll start with it out, and then I'm going to bring it in, and then once I've brought it in, I'm going to start messing with the controls so that you can get an idea, hopefully, of what this compressor can do on snare. Okay, so hopefully you got some idea of what this compressor is capable of with a snare. So obviously I'm going pretty extreme with it just because I want you to be able to hear what it's capable of, and then of course, you know, you can imagine like doing half as much of any of the things I did there. So yeah, a lot of variability here, and I found this a very interesting control in terms of just, it really changes the character of the compressor a lot from here to here and in between. So it really sounds like a bunch of different compressors depending on where you have this. And everything, the sound of it, all of it changes. The sound of the release and the attack and everything changes, and then it all changes depending on where this is set. So it's really very versatile. Now, I found it interesting with the attack, where even when, this is another slightly unusual thing about this compressor, even when you have a very long attack in milliseconds, it still seems to be grabbing it's still making it quite smacky. Like, you know, far beyond what I would expect on most compressors, where by the time you get up to sort of 60, you know, it's letting a lot of the attack through. And whereas this, I found it still clamping it. I mean, you can go really long and let all of it through, but it's kind of a little unusual in that way, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It gives you quite a range here of what you can do in terms of working with the attack, which is good. And the release also kind of, yeah, interesting. I didn't do an auto release. I'm just going to do a little bit of auto release so you can hear what that sounds like. So that I did do the auto attack, and obviously you can, even though it's on auto, you can make it go faster or slower within its auto setting on either of these. So what I'm going to do now is mess around a bit with what they call soul, which is like different harmonic patterns that emulate different hardwares. I'm just going to move it back and forth here. So fairly subtle effect on a snare. I think you're probably going to hear this more in a home mix. So I'll jump over to the kick drum now and see what we can do with that. So here's the kick drum. I'm going to take this out and then bring it in. I think I'm going to bring the whole kit back in now so you can hear the kick in context. Completely transformed the kick, made it a lot more kind of clicky and punchy. It wasn't a bad sound before, but just so you can hear what you can do. And on this one I am using some saturation there as well. So I'm going to mess around. There's a B setting here, so I'm going to flip over to that. So quite different here on the A and the B. This is a lot kind of tighter, clickier, and that's a bit of fuller sound. So I'll mess around now with the controls. You can have a listen to that. So again, hopefully you could hear that there was quite a big range of different sounds you can get on this, especially between these two different compression circuits and moving this around. Capable of getting like a really nice kick drum sound out of this, which is nice and tight and punchy with a nice click. So I'm going to now move over to listen to the drum bus, and let's have a listen to what we can do with that. So I'm going to start with it out, and then I'm going to bring it in. So hopefully you can hear what this O2 controller is doing. It really kind of thickens out the sound and kind of gels it together in quite a unique way. As I said, I'm really not sure what this is doing, but it definitely works nicely on some material, like on this drum bus. I didn't notice it doing a huge amount when I put it on a single thing like a snare, at least not with this snare, but with the drum bus, I'm definitely hearing it gelling and thickening the sound in a nice way. So that's a nice one. Now, let's move on to bass. I think I'll leave the drums in there. And then what we'll do is have a listen to the bass with and without. And then again, I'll mess with the controls. So start with it out. Now, it really tightens that bass up nicely. I have added some EQ on this, so I'm going to take that out because it's kind of not a little unfair of a comparison. Now, I haven't been demonstrating the EQ on this because I feel like it's its own separate thing. It's an EQ, and there are lots of EQs you could add at the end of a compressor. And so I'm just going to kind of leave that. I mean, there's a lot you can do with the sidechain, but I'm not going to get into all of that. So actually I'm going to take this out and just mess with the controls and see what we can do with the bass. So again, a lot of variation available on that bass. All within, I would say, I mean, one thing I'm finding about this compressor is it's quite forgiving. Like you can go pretty far, like pretty extreme with the controls, but it doesn't absolutely kind of destroy the material like a lot of compressors, when you push them to their extremes, they do. And I'm finding that this one's very forgiving, so even at its extremes it doesn't kind of destroy the material, and it keeps it sounding, I don't want to use the M word, musical, because I just find that term like it could mean anything, but I can't think of another word. It just does seem to be quite smooth and forgiving sounding wherever you set the controls, which is good. And also, you know, if you want something where you can really shape something very precisely, grab a signal and really kind of really shape it extremely, this probably wouldn't be as easy to do with this compressor, I think, as some other compressors. But on the other hand, if you want something which is always going to sound smooth and, you know, don't have to worry too much about getting controls exactly right to get a, you know, the sweet spot's pretty big on this one, I guess I would say. It sounds good, you know, in a wide range of controls. So it's just you know, it's a nice, interesting one. It's a different beast, I would say, from a lot of other compressors in that way. So let's move on now to looking at the final bit here, which is going to be the 2-bus here. So I'll start with this out, and I'm going to bring it in, and then I'm going to kind of mess around with this a bit and see what you think. Before I go any further, I mean, I would never put this amount of compression on a whole mix or anything like this amount. So just to be clear, I'm going way over the top here, as I have been doing with all the instruments really, just so that you can hear it more easily. So just try to keep that in mind if you think, wow, he's really slamming this. Yeah, I am. But it's just for demonstration purposes. I wouldn't normally push it anything like this far. So, okay, let's carry on. I'm going to keep messing with the controls. Okay, so I hope you found this useful. If you did, please do give it a like and press the thanks button. That's really helpful to keeping the channel going, and subscribe, and I hope to see you next time.